Hello YouTube. A friend of mine, after listening to the earlier recording I made from my book, asked me if I didn't mind reading another chapter. He liked the way I sounded in the first video, I presume, and I said I would go ahead and do so. This is a chapter that's in the first third of the book, and it's called Pastor Dean Harris. Here goes. Pastor Dean Harris. At 6 feet 2 inches tall and 240 pounds, Pastor Dean Harris is an impressive looking man. Looking more like a linebacker than a man of God, religion is the last thing you think of when you meet him. With a very strong, no-nonsense character, he was extremely intimidating at first. After I got to know him, however, he turned out to be a decent, devoted family man and a genuinely nice human being. Married for several years to his equally wonderful wife, Claire, he is raising several kids of his own when I bump into him in the fall of 1997. The occasion was some church function that Renee was attending with the girls. They were really just babies then, and I had come to pick everyone up. Pastor Dean Harris was the leader of a small but vibrant community church that Renee had somehow discovered. When he saw me sitting in the car, he walked over, introduced himself, and I had a short conversation with him as I waited for Renee and the girls. I found him to be friendly and good-natured. He seemed like a natural leader, albeit one that had some pretty set beliefs and convictions for sure. He, however, seemed to respect other people's views, or at least give them an ear, and did not come across as one of those unbendable Puritans. I especially liked the fact that he did not try to proselytize me. I have no patience with that predatory practice and find it to be imperial, self-serving, dismissive, and invalidating of other people's beliefs. Somewhat surprisingly, Pastor Dean was instead very gracious, welcoming, and seemed genuinely happy to have our family be part of his congregation, and I instantly took a liking to him. Did I share his faith in 1997? No. Unlike me, however, Renee was enthralled by the church. She walked it, lived it, and found tremendous truth in its message. She loved everything about it, and was always spouting some thought about this verse or that verse. I found the whole thing disorienting and bewildering. But having gone through a religious phase myself, in my late high school and early college years, I could relate somewhat to what she was going through. I had, however, gradually extricated myself from the more fanatical aspects of religion, and for several years was unaffiliated with any particular faith, before I eventually walked away from any and all religion. Why, you might ask? I was not convinced of any of it. Unlike most people, I had actually read the Bible and discovered to my profound surprise and indeed horror that the Bible is full of cruel, crazy, and downright ridiculous stories that make no sense whatsoever and are clearly made up. People do not live to be 961 years old, as described in Genesis 5:27. Snakes and donkeys do not talk, as described in Genesis 3:1 and Numbers 22, verses 21 to 39. The sun doesn't just stop in the sky, so Joshua can kill and plunder a little longer, as described in Joshua 10:13. People certainly do not fly, as described in Isaiah 60, verse 8. Why would having 42 boys mauled to death by bears be something a prophet of God thinks is an appropriate punishment after being jeered at, as described in 2 Kings 2:23 to 24? And of course, dead people don't rise from the dead and walk around, as described in Matthew 27:52. The whole thing is a fairy tale at best. That is the kindest description I can master. Tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of innocent people, including women and children, are slaughtered in God's name, and very often it is very command, countless of times. Genesis 18:19, Exodus 11:12, Numbers 21:2-3, Deuteronomy 20:17, 1 Samuel 15, etc., etc. In fact, God has in excess of 2.8 million deaths directly attributed to him. It's astonishingly perverse. He not only gloats, but even owns up to it, which is very disquieting. Deuteronomy 32:39-42. What was the point of hardening Pharaoh's heart so that God would then kill every Egyptian firstborn, as described in Exodus 9:12? Why have the animals killed too? Exodus 9:6. How was that their fault at all? It doesn't make any sense. I have no desire to follow a deity who favors one group over everyone else, as described in Deuteronomy 7:6, plays omniscient real estate broker, as described in Deuteronomy 34:4, at the expense of common decency, and is okay with the plunder of other people's lands and property, as described in Deuteronomy 20:14, 2 Chronicles 14:14, etc. The God depicted in the Bible is petty, cruel, vain. He is tribalistic. He plays favorites throughout the Bible. You better hope you are one of his chosen people, or you are done for. An honest reading of the Bible shows him not only to be sadist, but also a tyrant and bully. 2 Samuel 12:11 is a perfect example. He has very tenuous, questionable, constantly evolving homicidal tendencies and suspect values that I wanted nothing whatsoever to do with. If the Christian God is someone worthy of worship and praise, then he is not related to the God depicted in the Bible, and especially not the Old Testament. The God found therein not only condones slavery, but actually has a whole slew of verses that provide instruction about how one should treat one's slaves. Exodus 21:20-21, Leviticus 25:44-45, etc. He is apparently down with the practice of slavery and only fusses over the intricacies of how slaves should be managed. As hateful as it might sound, the Southern segregationists in the American Civil War were actually right. A plausible and disinterested reading of their Bible allowed and sanctioned slavery. They were following the word of their God. I dare anyone to read the Bible. Read the whole darn book in your favorite translation. Avoid jumping to your favorite chapter or verse as most people do, something I was guilty of doing myself. I even remain fond of John 10:10 to this day. Do not take my word or the word of your favorite pastor. Read it. If you are still enamored with the God of the Bible after that, let me know. I'm not. So what religion are you now? My sister, who is increasingly religious herself, asked me several years ago. I don't hold any religion to be sacred, I told her. I don't find divine wisdom in the pages of the Bible or any other sacred book for that matter. I believe in the inherent goodness of people sans the Bible. Try to be the best person I can be and the best father for our 2 girls. I do not seek nor need validation through religion. This was a profoundly shocking statement to my sister, who had never had anyone, let alone her very own brother, say anything negative about religion. Unlike me, Renee had a drastically different view on the matter, and indeed wanted the girls immersed into a religion at the outset. In fact, she thought me mad to even suggest otherwise. Of course our girls would go to Christian schools. Why ever not? In her defense, we have normalized religion. It is now expected, indeed required, in the education and the upbringing of children. No one ever seriously wonders why that is the best thing to do. Whoever has a different point of view is seen as the deviant and unqualified as a human being, and certainly as a parent. Renee could not even begin to understand, let alone appreciate, any other opinion than hers on this matter. It was not only futile, but downright blasphemous for me to even articulate my position. She was not going to spend any time evaluating the merits or demerits of my argument, as I clearly had none. In fact, what I probably needed was intercession and prayer as far as she was concerned. Discourse with the devout is fraught with demagoguery. I found the attitude to be typical of the religiously devout. Certainty without evidence. There was no way I was ever going to win this argument. Renee is free to believe what she may, but I choose not to follow a God who is okay with this stoning of children to death for disobedience, as described in Leviticus 20 verse 9, or the utterly depraved act of killing every living thing on the planet, but Noah's family and a few choice animals. Unlike the surety that surrounded Renee and her ilk, I did not believe in the stories and accounts of the Christian Bible, and would very much rather our girls had a more secular upbringing. The less religious, the better. Why, you might ask? Because science and reason demands so. Children are better off spending their time learning about the real world around them, and not imaginary and made-up places and ideas from centuries ago. The rigidity of religion on this matter is bewildering to me, exposing, in my opinion, an insecurity about its doctrine and tenets. This inflexibility is ultimately its greatest weakness. They cannot give any ground on God's teachings as described in the Bible. If they ever do, there will be nothing left to follow. Why Renee, and indeed anyone else, assumes they have the only true religion is very baffling to me. Billions of people of all kinds of different faiths all over the world assume the very same thing. They can't all be right. As Professor Richard Dawkins has correctly observed, religion is all about location. If Renee had been born in India, she probably would have been Hindu. Born in Pakistan, she most certainly would be Muslim. Born in Thailand, probably a Buddhist, etc. You get the drift. I don't see how her particular faith has any more legitimacy than any of the other ones, just because she was fortunate enough, in her estimation, to be born in a Christian country. At its very core, religion is therefore necessarily narrow-minded, narcissistic, self-righteous, and self-absorbed. It has to be. How else could they believe the dogma that clings to the claim that one's religion is the only true one and everyone else is wrong? Better yet, everyone else is not only wrong, but they are all going to hell. How can reason be a part of this kind of discourse? Why would they believe this? What evidence is there to support such fantastic claims? Because the Bible says so and claims such. Christopher Hitchens, echoing Occam's razor in 2003, declared, "What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence." I couldn't agree more. The claim of authenticity from the Bible carries no merit as far as I'm concerned. Biblical scholars, including Bart Ehrman, PhD, have made the remarkable point through painstaking research that there is no way to establish with any accuracy whatsoever what the original Bible ever said. All we have are copies of copies, generations upon generations removed from the original. Forged, Bart Ehrman, 2011. Even worse, we have no idea who even wrote the original documents that make up the Bible in the first place. Heck, there wasn't even an actual complete canonical Christian Bible